Welcome once more to a brand new episode of our podcast, American Spaces on Air, an initiative brought to you by the American Space at Instituto Chileno Norteamericano in Santiago, the American Academy of Science and Technology at Universidad de ETalca, with the collaboration of the Fulbright Commission in Chile, and the support of the United States Embassy in Santiago and the American Spaces Network in Chile. Today we have a very special guest. He is a Fulbright Scholar at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, and has worked as a marine biology and ecology undergraduate program director at the University of Miami. His name is Douglas Crawford, and we're very happy to have him here. So Douglas, welcome to American Spaces on Air.
Hello, good afternoon.
Okay, Douglas, so we will begin with our first question, which is, since when are you living in Chile, and in which city are you living right now?
My wife, who's also a Fulbright Scholar, myself and my 11-year-old daughter moved here in August. We're living in Santo Domingo. My 11-year-old daughter's going to school here, and we're working actually in La Cruces, just about 30 minutes up the road from us. So we're on the west coast of Chile.
Perfect. Okay, and could you tell us why did you choose to come here to Chile?
Yeah, so both my wife and I are evolutionary genomicists. We sequence DNA, lots of it, and we wanted to move from beyond what we have been doing, which is looking at physiology and the genes that affect physiology, to really ask about ecology. And so we needed an ecologist, and that's a very good one at La Cruces, and who's worked at network interaction, the rock intertidal. And it's exactly the ideas that he is an expert in, greatly complemented the research that we wanted to do. So we contacted Sergio Navarrete, and anyway, it was a long exchange, but yeah, we came here for that reason.
That's perfect. It's always nice to have people who complement your abilities and your work.
Yeah, it is actually.
Very good. And is it your first time here in Chile?
No, I was here about 10 years ago for a conference on genomics about 10 years ago. I don't really remember the date, but it was just for a week in Santiago.
Perfect. And how do you like Santiago and Santo Domingo as places to live in?
Well, we live in Santo Domingo, and we travel and go to Santiago. But actually, I would tell you that even though I like the city I live in, it's fantastic watching the sunset. Our best joys here has actually been driving around and traveling through Chile. So we've been all the way up to Iquique, San Pedro in the Alcometa Desert. We've been down to the end of the Carrera Estero because we drove the whole Route 7 down. So we've seen much of Chile, and it's an amazing place. Chile is physically diverse. It's an incredible environment. Really, it's outstanding, I would say.
Absolutely. As a foreigner myself, I find Chile to be a very beautiful place.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Very good. So we know that you are currently working on your Fulbright Scholar project. Could you explain a little bit about it in general terms?
Sure. So what we do is sequence DNA, the genomes, all the genes in an individual, and we sequence them in many individuals. And what we're really interested in is in the rock intertidal is how natural selection, Darwinian selection, affects who survives based upon the number of predators, competitors, and prey items. So among 5 interacting species. So what we're really interested in is doing, I know this sounds funny, the genomics of ecology. And so we're here to work with an ecologist, and what we're trying to do is we've actually set up experiments to look at how species interaction shapes, by Darwinian selection, the successful genotypes in the rock intertidal.
Perfect. And earlier, this has to do with eco-evolutionary genomics. So how does it help us understand rapid environmental change?
So what's funny is 7 years ago, I wouldn't have told you rapid evolution wasn't possible, but it turns out that not only lots of labs across the world, because you can sequence genomic DNA, you can find signatures of rapid evolutionary change. That it happens much faster than and much more widely than ever expected. And so we know from our research, what we do on a totally different system, that animals can rapidly adapt to their local environment. A species can adapt to change in temperature. That's really the things that we do. We look at change in temperature. What's really important, though, is no species is by itself. Every species has to interact with other species. They're either preyed upon by other species, they prey upon other species, they eat somebody else, or they compete with other species. And those interactions define the success of a community. And so we're here in Chile to try to figure out how those species interactions affect their genotypes or the successful genomes, to better understand rapid evolution due to species interaction.
Very good. Yeah, that's very curious, because usually common understanding regarding evolution, we tend to think that species take like a really long time to evolve, right?
They do. See, that's the kind of the conundrum. Species do take a long time to speciate, to make different species. But within a species, I believe it's correct. It turns out they're shifting how well they do in different environments, so for example, that if you're in a warm environment, you actually turn down your metabolism. And if you're in a cold environment, you actually turn up your metabolism. And those are just a few changes, a few genes. And so that happens a lot. Now, the question we're trying to deal with is, how does climate change affect species interactions, and whether more than one species, interaction of species, can do the same kind of adaptation to mitigate the effect of climate change. In other words, let's say a species can reduce the effect of increasing temperature by changing their physiology. That's great. I believe that does happen. The problem is that it has to interact with other species. And if they're not doing the same thing, or they're doing something different, there'll be maybe less prey to eat or more predators to eat them. In other words, it's not just one species you have to worry about, but many species. And what we don't know is, if rapid evolution can occur through species interactions, which might reduce the effect of climate change. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Perfect. Okay, so you have mentioned basically how does your research specifically addresses these challenges in environmental change, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what we're hoping. We've started the experiments, but they all take long. So we have more than one experiment. One experiment is just reducing predation and increasing competition, and what we have to let them grow up. But in the rock intertidal, and looking at how that affects the genotypes. And what we really want to know is, like I said, is how that affects genotypes, successful genotypes, and whether that really the interactions between individuals can adapt so that change in climate doesn't affect the networks of species interactions as much. Perfect. So I'll tell you that most of my research has nothing to do with ecology, but there's some very fine quantitative models on how species interact, who eats whom, how much they eat, whether they compete with each other, whether they facilitate with each other. And for the rock intertidal, which we're working right now, those models are probably some of the best in the world. So that's one of the reasons we're here. And so those models are very good, and they actually know the effect of environmental change on them. What they don't know is whether the environmental change, we know how it should affect the species interaction, but whether evolutionary changes can reduce the negative effect of those changes between species. It's all really kind of complex. Hopefully that was clear.
It is, and it's also very, very interesting. Now I would like to ask you about, on March 22, it was World Water Day. So how is water being affected by climate change, and also how it is affecting our climates
Yeah, so there's the two things that people like to think about. And the one is what most people talk about. That's the average change in temperature, which isn't, when you tell people that, it's changing by 1.5 degrees Celsius, they go, well, on a warm day, it gets warmer than that. So how important is that? And so it's hard for people to conceive that an average change of 1.5 degrees is actually important. But what's really important is how much that temperature varies from one day to the next, and the effect it has on the strength and severity of storms. So for the oceans, the biggest effect is having a small change in temperature. It does have a large effect on how animals succeed. That's my daughter. Anyway, but more importantly, it also has the effect of like ocean upwelling. So upwellings are when water rises from the deep because of currents, and it brings a lot of nutrition to the surface and increases fisheries production because lots more fish can eat a lot more plankton, and more plankton feeds everything on the coast, and it becomes more productive. So climate changes affect those currents and the frequency of upwelling, and that changes the nature of interactions between species. So that's for ocean systems. The other effect is how much acid is in the water, or the pH of the water. So it's a little complex, but more CO2 can make an ocean more acidic. And if an ocean is slightly more acidic, then things like lobsters, crabs, shellfish have a harder time making shells. And if they have a harder time making shells, then they don't develop as well, and they're more likely harmed by other environmental effects. So it becomes this feedback of warmer waters will cause animals to grow faster, stronger variation in temperatures, so storms, weather storms, change in currents all affect how much food is available. And then at the same time, you're losing your ability to grow. And so there's a real problem, potential problem, not just on how it impacts humans, but also how it impacts ecology in which we depend upon, our fisheries, how much food we can get from the ocean, and everything else. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I'm also wondering, you were mentioning that acidic oceans or water can create problems for species like crabs and lobsters. And of course, this would mean that they are forced to evolve, right?
Yeah, so that's a great question. No, go ahead and finish your question. I think I know what it is, but yeah.
Yeah, can this be a cause of rapid evolution?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. It's something you can adapt to, and this is where, unfortunately, you have to look at every species. I don't want to get too technical. The ability to rapidly evolve depends upon having large population sizes, because there's a lot of genetic variation. And so this is a silly example, but I don't know a better one for it. Imagine all the different hair colors there are. Everything from bright white, blonde, light bronze, strawberry blonde, reds, dark hair, dark brown hair, really black hair, shiny black hair. Imagine all those hair colors are only possible because there's lots of different genes affecting them. Now multiply that times 1,000, and that would be kind of the idea of genetic variation for some important trait, being able to make a shell when it's acidic out. And so the question is that variation available? Are there a bunch of redheads, blonde hairs, black hair stuff for shell morphology? Is there a bunch of genes that are infected? If there isn't, then you can't. So part of the things that we're really interested in, and part of the things that's really important is defining the variation among any species. So overfishing or anything like that reduces the amount of genetic variation that can be used for adaptation. So there's no other way to know that except by looking. You have to look at each species to know how much variation is. The second point is some things aren't adaptable to. And so this sounds really silly, but I'm going to make this a story up. If you're an ant, you can't adapt to a foot stepping on you, right? It just doesn't work. There's nothing you can do.
Of course.
Right? You can't become super ant because no such thing exists. So some things you can adapt to. Can you adapt to to really low pHs? That's a good question. And I don't know the answer to that. I simply don't. I mean, I know that the animal I work with back in the States, can adapt to actually about a 4 to 5 degrees change in temperature. So that's pretty phenomenal. And there's a good reason for it. It has huge population sizes and it has a lot of genetic variation.
Very good. Okay, so basically what you're saying is that to have or to be able to see rapid evolution, you need high populations of species, right?
Yeah, so that's basically that's one of the take-home messages. And so one of the reasons just to ask how much genetic variation is among any one population is to ask that one question: how likely are they to adapt? And so some animals we've really fished a lot, cods in North America, right? So we've fished them down to such a small population sizes that they have very little genetic adaptation, and that so that doesn't portend well for them. And yeah, I don't mean to be negative, but
It's understandable.
Yeah.
It's like the more of that animal that there is, the more possibilities they have to evolve.
Right. Exactly.
Perfect. And of course, as you mentioned, there are things that you just can't evolve out of, like being stepped on if you're an ant.
Yes, correct.
Perfect. Doug, and what can you say about the dual degree program that you and your Chilean colleagues are working on?
Yeah, so much of that is to my wife, because my wife was the associate dean of undergraduates at University of Miami. But so the idea is simply that students from Chile can come up to Miami for 2 to 3 years, and the coursework they do there counts for their coursework that they have down in Chile. And the same thing goes for our students in Miami. They can come down to Chile for 2 or 3 years, and the coursework they do down here would count for their degree up there. And it's not just coursework. Realize if you're a PhD student, part of your coursework is I'm working in a lab. And so that lab work in Chile would count. And the reason why that's important for us, for people in the United States, is that one is we get the talented pool of scientists from Chile. But the other reason is that it's easier for us to pay graduate students their tuition and stipend if they're actually attending the University of Miami. So it's really hard for me to pay a graduate student in Chile for their education because my grant said I can only spend in the United States. I only have money that says you must spend in the United States. So if we can have them up in the United States for 2 or 3 years, I can pay for part of their education. And so we can have that collaboration. Now, what does Chile get out of this? Because they don't have that problem with the paying students in the United States. It's only the United States does. Chile gets it is that our students get to come down and they get to work for them here or collaborate with them down here. So we both benefits by their students coming to the United States and our students coming down to Chile. And then the other thing is just the collaboration itself is enhances our ability to do more interesting research, right? So it
gives them the possibility of seeing and experiencing a different culture as well, which is
right. But so remember what we said about Chile being incredibly environmentally diverse. So I mean, I've traveled out through the United States. It's also environmentally diverse, but not as diverse as Chile. And there's a real synergy in being able to look for my type of research, to look at all that diversity. So not only do you get cultural diversity, which is something we haven't addressed, which is kind of fun, but you also get this incredible different perspective of the professors who work here, who have more knowledge about the local environment than we do, but also it's slightly different perspective than what you'd get in the United States, but also in a huge environmental variation to work with. So that's really good for our students coming down here. What we would hope for their students come up there is they would get a different perspective of what we do. I mean, so yeah, we would hope it would be advantageous we plan for it to be advantageous for all groups.
And I'm sure it is.
Well, we just started it, so we'll see.
Exchange opportunities are always a great way for people to not only get to know more of the world, but get to know how things work in different countries, and that's very, very important.
Totally agree with you on that. Just you get to know what you miss in your country and what you enjoy in other countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so my next question to you would be, how do you see the field of experimental eco-evolutionary genomics evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I already told you 7 years ago what I just told you about replicative evolution, I would have said was impossible. So what can happen in 5 more years? It's really, I'm going to tell you a little story. I know it makes you feel like, an old man story, but so 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, we could sequence in a week, working really hard, maybe 200,000 base pairs. So each base pair, A, a G, a C, right? What the DNA, each of those things. So in a week we could do that. Now we have undergraduates in our lab, in a course we teach, an undergraduate course, and they sequence. I'm trying to get the number right. 11 billion in a week.
Oh wow!
The amount of data they get is amazing. How much you get, and so what that takes is actually a lot of computational science, which I would have never told you I would have done 10 years ago. But yeah, so everything we do now takes computers to analyze it. And so now what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years is that there's, the advancement of AI is going to make data analysis better, and the ability to sequence is even going to become cheaper. And so the thing is that what we hope to do, and what others are probably planning to do too, is to incorporate experimental ecology in with population genomics to understand how animals survive and the genes that are important. And so what's fundamentally important about that kind of stuff, besides knowing how crab evolves, is in fact the general idea of how many genes affect a trait and how they differ between individuals. So when we think about, for humans, we think about medical intervention, about giving a drug to reduce cholesterol or a drug to treat depression. We're often told that, what we're thinking about is treating a single gene that this drug works on. It turns out that may not be how most systems work in a human or any other organism, that there are many, many genes that are variable, and which ones are variable affect how well you work in different environments, so how healthy you are. So one of the surprising thing, for example, is Prozac, at least the first formulation of Prozac, worked on 20% of the population. In other words, 7 years ago, if you had depression and your doctors prescribed Prozac to you, you had 20% of chance of it working. Now that's great for the 20% of the people it works on. And so the question is, why doesn't it work on the other 80%? And that's this general idea that comes about in the last 5 to 7 years, is that there are many, many different genes that affect these things, and the ones that affect you aren't the same ones that affect other people. So that there is this variation in the genes that make you healthy. And that's a common idea that's coming out in the last 7 years, even though people are looking at lizards, frogs, crabs, other things, because they're easier to work with than humans. And that's kind of the insightful thing. So you asked me, what do I expect in 5 to 7 years? I wish I could tell you, but what I will tell you is that the ability to analyze data is going to become greater, and the ability to gather data is going to become greater. And it's really hard to keep up on how fast the technology has changed to improve what we're doing. I mean, it's phenomenal. Yeah, it is phenomenal.
Absolutely, and it's happening right in front of our eyes.
Yeah. So we write and we say we can sequence this much, to a granting agency. We can sequence this much in a year. That's what we tell them. And then, 2 weeks later, the company comes out and that we can do 10 times as much. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not bad for us. It's like, oh, great. For the same amount of money, we get 10 times the amount of data. But
absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And just as you mentioned that you would process a certain amount of information 10 years ago, and now it is a much bigger number, I'm sure it's going to be the same in 10 more years. So
5 more years, it is. And that's why, actually, the funny thing is that without computers increasing in the ability to do computational work, none of this would have been possible. You couldn't analyze data without computers. And so, everyone's been talking about AI, but there's so many different possible patterns in DNA sequence variation. It's a lot of work to figure out what's important. And the thing is that more, I'm going to say it, intelligent ways to look at the data, the better. And so I actually think there's going to be a real opportunity to figure out a lot about health in humans, health in every animal, but health in the ecology, in ecosystems, among lots of other things. And I say that versus diseases, because diseases are different. But the question is, what makes a healthy population of living organisms, and what can we do to maintain that health, which is a different way of looking at medical stuff, because looking at health.
Perfect. Very good. And I have another question for you, which is, what can we do as common citizens to counter the effects of climate change in our communities?
Well, I'm going to tell you what you've probably heard before. One is recycle and reuse so that you don't use more energy. The other is use less energy. What I'm constantly surprised by is how much sun there is in Chile. And if I could wave a wand and everybody have solar power in Chile, I would. That would cut down the amount of energy and CO2 being produced in the world. Now, Chile is not a major contributor to climate change, but since your audience is mostly Chile, I mean, it does not hurt to reduce your footprint on the earth by recycling, reusing less things. I mean, use a bottle and refill it with water versus buying a bottle of water. I know this sounds common, but the other thing is that there's alternative energies that are especially available in Chile that could and should be used. And it probably will be used in the future. Those are the things I would suggest. I mean, in my own country, it's really what the United States needs is more mass transit, so people drive less. That's the bottom line. If people drove less, then they could afford more for electric cars, which are expensive. And electric cars pollute less. And that's one of our major form of pollution, not just cars, but making the things that make cars. And so that's what I would say, besides recycle and reuse.
Perfect. Now, is there a way to stop or to control or what would be the appropriate way of saying this? Rapid evolution.
Oh, do you want to control? I don't think you can control it. You can utilize it. Yeah, you can utilize it. So, for example, there's a lot of fish farming in Chile. And you can imagine that you would want to raise fish that had a higher omega-3, which is a fatty acid, and that's good for your heart. You can imagine that you that's what you want, is you want more salmon, trout with more omega-3s so the whole population is healthier, because in Chile we eat lots of salmon. Yes? Yeah. Yes, it's definitely true. And so you can imagine that you could select for animals with a higher omega-3 content and hopefully sell those fish for more. You as a fish farmer or a fisher would make more money, and the Chilean population would be healthier. And so that's controlling, and all that is selective evolution. It's like choosing dogs with long hair or cows that produce more milk. All those things can be done. And so what's really funny is when we think about rapid evolution and think about, in fact, agriculture, it's actually not that big of a surprise, because people have been selecting for cows to have more milk fat or more milk, or chickens to lay more eggs. And that's actually pretty rapid. But yeah. So,
very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one common example that we don't think about very often.
No, I know. And this is what I do for a living, and most of my colleagues don't think about it much either. It is interesting because it's all that information is out there, right? Yeah.
Perfect. Douglas, we are reaching the end of the interview, and I wonder if you have one final message to our audience or a comment about the Fulbright scholarships.
No, but I've just lost you. I can't. Can you still see me? Because I can't
Yes.
see you anymore. Right. So fine. I'm going to talk blindly. Hopefully you can see me and we're great. Funny. What I would say is that there's opportunities for Chileans to go to the United States, to Europe, and other, well, the United States on a Fulbright, and that you should explore those ideas. One is that you get an idea of what the United States is like, which hopefully will be positive. But two, you can also enhance your education by going to the United States and bringing back any information back to Chile. So I guess my first voice is, look into the Fulbrights, come to the United States, and do something. That's my first thing. And you asked another part of that question, and I'm not sure I answered it. Can you answer that to me again?
Yeah, if you wanted to talk about the Fulbright scholarships or a final message to our audience, that's what
I did. That is my final message. Is come to the United States on a Fulbright.
Perfect.
That's what my but yeah.
Perfect. Douglas, thank you very much for your time. This was a very interesting conversation, and I definitely learned a lot about rapid evolution. And
all right. Well, thank you for the interview. It was fun.
Perfect.
All right.